This is my piece. I decided to put this up here since I'm on my computer and it's a little larger. This is actually connected to a holder. This is my holder for it. This piece here is what I brought to Milan Milan Jewelry Week last year. So, really talking about building spectacular. This would be a piece that I'm going to show when we get into the next chapter on wire. Really just the combinations and the different type of stacks you can make with this. And this is really, I'm building large. Bezels expanded, caging, which is coming up. Here's another bezels expanded right here, just all the way down to the very end. It really is a spectacular piece on. I was actually going to use this piece as in some performance art that's coming up. Well, this one actually is bezels expanded. You can see I put 3 different wires together to create this bezel wire. So you can see, like, this is our traditional bezel wire that we're used to, right guys? And then we're also used to, there's a couple different kinds. There's just a couple different kinds of bezel wire when we're using these, and it makes things so light and so beautiful. And normally when you see this filigree work, a lot of this filigree work was hand built in India, Indonesia, Thailand. I actually have a little collection here that I want to bring out. Mexico, in Oaxaca area. And this is another set that I did of closing up these filigree wires that I did, of really just stacking 3 types of bezel wire together. You can see the beaded wire, you can see the square wire, and then you can see the filigree. So these are both the same. When I was in Indonesia, one of the things I was having them do work for me, and I just assumed, like everybody else would assume, you just buy this type of work from Rio Grande, right? Your bezel wire made for you. Well, guess what? Back in the day, I don't know why this didn't even occur to me. When I was working with this jeweler specifically about building a piece for me, he was like, oh, maybe I can build it exactly like that. I showed him a piece that I liked built, and he was like, oh, maybe I can build this type of wire like that. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, you're building it from the wire out. And it was kind of just an epiphany for me, right? Have you guys really thought about that? This was actually hand built at one time when people brought it into their work. This filigree work makes it super light, very delicate, and so beautiful. If you look up close, it's a lot of, there's some of them that have, right on the tips of this, you see a lot of granulation. What is granulation? You can order granulation from Rio Grande. Granulation is just tiny, your little balls that we're making by heating them up. You'll see a lot of this in the last chapter and how we're connecting these. This is actually a piece from Thailand that has the granulations. They're just built, this beautiful little end tip is just built with 3 little granulation balls. Fine silver, you almost could fuse these together. Really the way that this type of work is done, and maybe this is going to be one of the things that I show, it's not in the workshop, we're not building our own wire. The nice thing about building your own wire is you just get back into the rawness of jewelry, and you're building your own work, and there's going to be nobody else like the jewelry that you have when you're kind of going back to rustic, pulling your own wire, making your own granulation. I have a couple examples right here. This was a piece, oh my gosh, that I bought in Oaxaca a few years ago, and oh, I love it. This was all hand built. You can see all of the filigree and the wire twisted work that's in here. You can see that wire twisted work. Is that amazing? And so when I was in Indonesia, you really get to see the silversmith's work, and really it's just done right onto your board. So you have your board right like this, and all of your granulation is just laid out flat. Everything is all pushed together, and then you just hit it with your torch all the way towards the end. Doesn't that sound easy? This is a piece recently I bought from Mexico. You can see there's actually crimped tiny wire. I imagine these are like a 32 gauge. So you're literally soldering together your frame and putting, just little crimped wire in here. We have these little crimpers that are kind of fun. A lot of people do these though, one by one and by hand. The research that I did on this project is, this is that legacy book that I suggested for a lot of people some time ago. This is also a piece from, I think it's from India. And you can see how the circles, it's just a hammered flattened wire put into round shapes put it into all different shapes. Oh my gosh, my studio is so warm today. So, you know, and really the different types of shapes you can get in here. Here's another one here. This one actually isn't really an authentic one. You can tell it looks like it's pressed, but I thought it would be worth showing anyway. You can see the back. It's just kind of stamped out and pressed out, but it's interesting in itself as it is, you know. The turquoise is not such a good one, but I'm thinking it's kind of like a secondary Indian type of jewelry. And this one, oh my gosh, I just love. I'll get a photo of this and put this after we get done talking today. You can see the negative and positive space in here of just the different shapes of wire. So this is actually a French man who spent a lot of time in Nigeria and all over Africa, and it was his purpose just to go and spend time with all these goldsmiths and silversmiths. So this one is wonderful. So there's a couple Nigerian artists in here that are doing the filigree work, and we've seen this filigree work, and it's like this is very, very impressive. And the thing that also is very impressive is the type of work that can be produced with the raw tools. And that is really what I love about this book. But I'm gonna show you guys, you know, it's similar to kind of some of the pieces I'm showing now in Legacy. And this is a gentleman that has, you know, this is what you learn. His name is Abrama Kandi. And they put his profile in here, you know, but he's really talking about how he does all this type of crimping in his work to get the filigree in here. Now, thanks, I know, it's so exciting. So, you know, really and here, this is fabulous. When he does that crimping, you can see he's setting up to make a leaf. I see so many people who are interested in, you know, a lot of this nature type work, which makes sense. You know, it's really interesting. In the Legacy, you're just gonna see people work with like 2 or 3 tools. This is a collection of tools that are put together. This is literally a silversmith collection of tools. You know, I love getting back to the raw and seeing how pieces were originally made. Because in our world right now, it's so easy. Everything is at our fingertips. All the tools are at our fingertips. All of the made products, you know, especially with Rio Grande. Anytime you think, oh my gosh, I need some type of a small crimper, boom, it's invented for you and you have it in your hand. I like going back to this idea of, you know, honing your skills, learning really how to bend your filigree wire. The man in here that I was showing you guys, he literally hand bends his own 32 gauge flattened wire that he's pulled and rolled through his rolling machine. There's so many different subjects and so many different things to do in jewelry as we're finding. So this program, I wanted to start this program just to show what a variety of techniques and information and cultural work and, you know, adornment and all of this, you know, the value and non-value and you know, just technique, just different techniques. So for me, it's like this is part of my whole program and what I do. You know, in intentional metalsmithing, I'm just inspiring people and showing techniques. But this program that I'm doing here on Facebook Live that I might move to Instagram Live is just really about showing all these different ways to do jewelry. You know, and some people, it's like, you know, some people you might decide just to really try your hand at a little bit of this filigree. The thing is that if you hand build your own filigree work, you are going to have something different that no one else has. One of the more impressive things that I want to talk about too is that with this type of work, you know, a lot of it at the base is done with twisted wire. This was a piece that I had just done recently, but you know, in twisting a lot of my wire and using this beaded wire, you really can get a beautiful filigree look as well. You know, so that's kind of, I see it's really what Bezels Expanded is all about. You can see that when techniques are done, you know, I talked to you guys about not doing cultural appropriation, but you know, we're used to looking maybe in India for all of this filigree work, but usually you can find this type of work throughout all cultures, you know, which is so exciting, ancient cultures, you know, really because, you know, we talked about back in the 1100s, the Vikings came through and did all this trading, and then the East Indian Trade Company came in and did all this trading, the British did all this trading. So things were kind of spread out in all different cultures, and in each culture it came in and pieces were made into their own. So a lot of my work in here, I built a lot of small pieces, and you know, when I'm really in the mood of kind of just organizing. I've been organizing the workshop and organizing a lot of different things. So I just work on, just kind of building pieces. And then when I really get into this right brain kind of creative work, I get in and I assemble, and I love that. So, for me, I had an opportunity, which I talk back on one of mine, I had an opportunity to go work in Mexico and kind of undo. It was my undoing process, thinking about building your own filigree. I didn't even know building your own filigree was a thing. So it's so interesting to open my eyes in different layers as I'm getting deeper into my filigree. And I think it's been really enjoyable, really inspirational. Whenever I teach a group of people, and there's people and you get into a rut. If you get into a rut with your work and you don't know what to do next, one of the things that I suggest to people is, look, just wake up and do something different today. Just turn a corner different. Just go a different way to work. Just, look at a piece of jewelry, but really look at it. Like, look at all the angles and think about if with granulation, on here you can see we have the beaded wire, right? You guys see how the beaded wire, if anyone has worked with beaded wire, it's tricky to work with. It might fall apart kind of easily. You have to be careful working with the beaded wire. It's actually just a collection of granulation that's put together, and could be very, very easy to do. So for me, when I worked in the raw in Mexico, that's exactly what I did, is just made a lot of these small balls, laid them out together, and soldered them down, and that's really the way that you did things. So in India, there's all the street jewelry makers there. They're working with a lot of filigree. They bring it back to simplistic. When we were in Indonesia and I asked him to make this piece for me, he literally hand built all the filigree work, which completely blew me away. Also, many times people in other countries, which is so fascinating to me, are still working with coal and blowing air, which is some of the jewelers in this book here that have done this incredible work. And I brought in this was one of my very first books from way back when I was in my 20s, Indian jewelry making. It's so interesting because it is all this very, very sophisticated work. And I started reading this. It was from Tandy Leather. I went in, I think it was Tandy Leather, back before Rio Grande was Rio Grande. And literally, they were talking about coals and bellows to get their jewelry working done. It's still done that way in parts of Nigeria, in Africa. It's still done that way in some countries. Literally coals and bellows. And, these Indian people in Mexico as well, in the 1700s, 1800s, we're still doing pieces like this. A lot of times when we went to Indonesia, there's people that are working with butane. They look different. If they can't get their butane hot enough, they're literally pumping oxygen into their butane to make it hotter. Guess what makes any gas hotter? Oxygen. So, if you've got a nice, when I have my fan on and I'm in here working in my studio, if I have my fan on, I have to take that into consideration for how hot my flame is getting. Isn't that interesting? This is another one that in Thailand, there's a lot of beautiful, beautiful filigree work. And remember, a lot of this work was done by, just like how I talked about the Vikings last week, a lot of this work was done by getting these European coins, and it's like, what am I gonna do with this? But have really heavy pockets, So actually it was just still, again, in Thailand, we used to, so it was about melting these pieces down and testing, and making them into these beautiful pieces. I used to have such an incredible collection of pieces from Thailand. And when I worked, I told a story about when I worked at this crazy place back when I was in my 20s, where I was a silver buyer. We bought, I really did ethnographic jewelry repair. That was on another time. But one of the things that we did there also, when we started the Greater Chicago Bead Society, one of the things that my group and I did as well is we could test the silver content of pieces that were from Thailand, and we could kind of date the period of time because of the mixes of coins that were done in Europe when maybe the pieces, were built in Thailand. So it was real interesting by, checking the silver content. It was all just from melting down European coins. So pretty interesting. When you're really doing pieces like that that are out of the norm, which is really what intentional metalsmithing is really what this type of work that I want you to think about doing. If you get in a rut, if you get in a depression as artists, if you get in a place of, oh my gosh, my work is not good enough, well, for one, you have to undo from a lot of that social media. And a lot of times we give you a direct link, especially people in the course, we give you a direct link just to get right on, so you don't even have to filter through all of this as times get kind of hard. But, so if you find yourself just kind of wearing down a little bit, as artists, we're people that soak in information. So when you sit and listen to the news, you're soaking it in on a different level. The reason why we're set up this way is we're soaking it in, and if you're soaking in things intentionally, you're soaking it in and it's gonna come back out in your work, which is really awesome, You have to be brave to take an unusual route. When you're with jewelers, a lot of times people are telling you, oh, those tools aren't right, you're using the wrong thing. You guys can see I have my big acetylene torches back here, and I love my acetylene torches. There's nothing wrong with my acetylene torches. I love it. I used to only solder with acetylene, but when I travel and teach, this opened up so many doors for me to learn how to use this torch, because in other countries, that's really what is available, is butane. So, and it's a much cooler gas. So you can either, have the bellows, have your fans on, get more oxygen pumping in. There's some people that do a foot pedal. That's what I saw in Indonesia, the foot pedal. To be inspired, to really get back, it's really good to know the foundational of what jewelry is about. And that's what I am all about. I'm always, when I teach a workshop or when I talk about a workshop, it's like absence makes your work expand. If you don't have the perfect tool, you have to work harder to get it done right, And I'm not saying that you have to keep working that hard, or so you could vary it, just in some ways, you'll get faster and faster and faster. I show up in my studio 4 to 5 times a week, probably 4 times a week. I'm showing up with you guys through this course that I'm teaching, and the reason I'm showing up is that I want to also produce some eye candy, so you guys have another place to aspire to, another place to move to. Just by looking at the way one thing is done, you can take one little inspirational piece and just expand in a whole different direction that no one else is. So I'm hoping, like, all these techniques, all these cultures, all this information is just growing your, Rolodex in your brain to, to think about where to go. Now, when you get onto a certain pathway, just keep going and exploring it. The earrings that I showed you guys right here, believe it or not, I'll hold these both up. This is actually very similar, it's very, very similar to the same thing. Also, what I wanted to tell you guys, I'm going to be doing a little bit more on, let me hold both these up. I'll just hold it like this. Okay, I'm going to be doing a little bit more on cold joints too. It's so interesting. When you get into right brain, these are on the same theory. Both these pieces are on the same concept, same theory. This one has more movement. So cold joints are actually a really nice one. When you're working in right brain, like some of us are doing, as we're, for me, I love the idea of working with a smaller torch rather than a big oxygen torch, because when I'm in right brain, I'm really building and trying different things. And it's funny, I laughed when I built this piece that you guys love so much, but I laughed and I wanted to make sure that I brought this up to you guys today, just about mistakes. So I got all finished with it and I was like, oh my gosh, I did not put an area to attach my ear wire. Isn't that funny? Has anyone ever done that before? So, it's just like really in thinking in a cold joint way. You just have to solve problems. Now, what can I do? And I really like this because it actually has a little bit more movement, and it sits lower, and I can actually put the ear wire right back behind the gem. So this really sits almost right up on my ear. So it's kind of interesting, you know. I love when I make mistakes. Remember, I was telling you guys that. Yeah. So for me, it's like when, you know, the butane I really enjoy working with, I can get in, I can still really be in my creative mind, and I can, you know, just not have to worry about such a hot flame. You guys have seen the big work that I do. Sometimes I'll just work with 2 flames just to see. For 3 years, all I've been doing is using this torch. And sometimes for the really big work, I use 2. I was just about, right before I did intentional metalsmithing, I was just about to go back to my acetylene because I'm not traveling as much. And then I was like, oh, wait a second. I want to work right alongside of everyone else using the butane. You guys are welcome to, you know, move up and do the acetylene or do the propane. The only thing that I have to warn you about is that with this one, it's very forgiving. You know, I talk about this torch a lot, but the gas doesn't rise. You know, I can have ventilation, but I don't have to worry about breathing in the carbon monoxide. It just kind of sinks. And, you know, I don't have to worry about cords. I don't have to worry about leaks. I don't have a lot of worries. I can work in my kitchen. You know, I can work in a small, tiny space on a cookie sheet. When you start getting into acetylene tanks, which is perfectly fine, oh my gosh, you know, have a studio. You know, first of all, find out if this is going to be metalworking as part of your life. And if it is, bump up to, you know, a different torch. You can get your work done a little bit quicker. I just loved putting together this type of work, and I actually got really, really quick with this type of a torch. So, but with the acetylene torches or anything, you need to have a studio, you need to have a cement floor, you need to have a bigger workspace because it's a super hot gas. You need to have good ventilation. You need to wear a mask because now the carbon monoxide is raising up to stay healthy. You need to make sure that there is no holes in your, you know, in your hose. You know, you kind of can put water on there and check it once a week. There's just a lot more details that, you know, for me, it's like, I don't want to worry about all that right now. Let's have fun and let's build with our pieces. And it's really fun because when you learn to do things in the raw, think about what you're going to be able to do if you decide to stay a jeweler and, you know, really get into using different tanks. So it's pretty exciting, you know. All of this is like just all these preliminary of getting into the raw and building this type of work. Like you guys can see, I love tools, you know, and I love a good tool, but it's like now I like to think about, I like to put thought into, okay, a rolling mill. Why do I need a rolling mill? What am I thinking about doing with a rolling mill? You know, what type of rolling mill? And then if I decide to invest in a rolling mill, yeah, I know a lot of pliers, I love pliers. You know, if I decide to invest in a rolling mill, I want to get a nice one. You know, it's like, I feel like in the past I just kind of bought a lot of things just to buy them, you know. The only reason I think I talk about a lot of this limiting yourself is because it grows your brain in a different way. You understand the foundation of silversmithing when you either start off that way, or if you've been a jeweler for a long time and you just kind of take a step back and you're like, hey, I'm going to try using, you know, just this little small, you know, and see what I can do with this, which is what I did for 3 years. After I did a trip to Mexico and just rolled my own wire, built my own filigree, you know, rolled my own sheet metal, melted down coins that I bought from the bank and added some copper in there, you know, fine silver coins, and put it into an ingot, poured them out, you know, poured them out into an ingot, rolled it through, got my wire, got my sheet metal, made my own solder. You know, it was really a process that was so fulfilling for me to get at my ground root. So that's, I think for me, it's like to start off this way or to take a break and get at this ground roots again is really wonderful. This is a scribe that I bought from Dan Essick, who is an amazing artist in journals. And you know, I just love the angle that he has on the stick. That's polished so beautiful. You can see how my hand sits on here. It's actually, this is a nice rest here, and I can get, you know, use this as my scribe and carve into things. Really, I just like looking at it, you know, but I love handmade pieces. This is just part of the tree. that's actually on here. That one you don't really want to use, but it's interesting. You know, here's some nice handmade scissors that are so interesting from Blacksmith.